Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. Kerwin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, mate, it's an honor. The honor's all mine. Question for you. If a complete stranger stops you on the street and asks you what you do for a living, what would you say?
Mate, I still struggle to answer that question, if I'm really honest. I have interest in a couple of businesses. But look, I guess it depends on the context that I'm in. But I often just say that, I own a couple of small businesses. And if it gets a little bit deeper than that, I tell people that I own an education company and a small venture capital firm. But look, it's one of those things. I'm actually, like in every day, I'm actually quite shy. I'm not. Look, I am a little bit of an extrovert, but for the most part, I'm quite introverted. But I have the same challenges that most people have when it comes to meeting new people on the street, as I'm often a little bit shy.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think nearly everyone I have on the podcast struggles with that question, to be honest with you. And there's so many dynamics to it, but it's always a great place to start for people.
The funny thing is, I actually take people through this process. One of the events that I run, Nail and Scale, I actually show people how to answer that question, really beautifully and perfectly. And sometimes it's a case of the shoemaker's shoes. Again, it always comes down to context. If I'm in a professional context, I typically have a different remark. But look, essentially, I specialize in performance. My main area is business and fast growth. But I don't just work with entrepreneurs and business owners. I've also worked with professional athletes. Around high performance, the psychology behind high performance, and especially how that translates and is executed in a business environment. Because business is much like sport. The stronger the mindset, the stronger the capacity for competition and ability to outdo our personal best.
Totally. And, the other things I certainly want to touch on today, like you clearly, I think I stumbled across you about 18 months to 2 years ago and just been watching afar ever since. And what I might be wrong from the outside looking in, but to me, it seems like you're clearly living on purpose. And I was intrigued to start there because I always I believe I'll be exposing you because I'm kind of more in the wellness industry. So I believe I'm going to be exposing you to a lot of new listeners today. And I was intrigued can you give us a snapshot? And now you seemed as if you live many lives in one life. So I don't know how you're going to do this, but have you always been an entrepreneur? How did you get to the point where you are now on purpose?
Look, it's an interesting question. It's a big one. I'll try and give you the synopsis. I've had in my employment, I think I tried to sit down and count it one day. I think I ended up having like 48 different jobs before I started my first business. Have I always been an entrepreneur? Look, I'd say in some respect, in the early days, boys breed values. And when I was very young, my parents separated when I was about 6 months old, and I grew up, being brought up by a single mum on a pension. So, money wasn't something that was necessarily abundant. The stories of money were often, quite lack orientated. And so I grew up, always never being able to afford things, never being able to have enough money for things. And so from a very early age, that void kind of bred this value that one day I want to be able to have enough money to be able to do the things, have the things, and, be the person I've always wanted to be. I think it was about 13 when I started my first entrepreneurial enterprise. First of all, I tried to wash cars. The first car we washed, me and my mate, we scratched it quite badly because he had this big so we got in big trouble. The second business we started like 2 days later, and this was all in, with the aspirations of making some money to go to the Townsville show, which is like the carnival that came to show once a year, to town once a year. And the second thing we tried 2 days later was mowing lawns, and I was mowing someone's driveway, and I went over a pebble and it went through like a 20 square foot glass plate window, and that shattered. So that didn't work. And we ultimately settled on, shoveling horse manure and putting it into garbage bags and taking it door to door. In our first 3 weeks, we made about $380. And by the time the show rocked around, we had about $500-600 from manure door to door. And, I kind of joke about it now. And I say to people, like, what would you pay to get rid of two 12-year-olds that show up on your doorstep with a barrel load of horse shit just to get them to move on, So it was quite a successful enterprise. And then, as I said, had lots of different jobs. I always worked hard. In school, I had like 3-4 jobs. I would, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I had a job working in a gym from about 4:30, 5 o'clock until 8:45. Then I'd go to school. Then I was working in a restaurant as a hot side chef from about 3:45 until 1 a.m. And then the weekends. I did landscape labouring from sunrise until sunset, and that was Saturday and Sunday. So even in high school, I was making more money than my teachers.
Yeah, wow, wow. And I'm always intrigued because one of the things that I'm finding is with a lot of people with the work I do and what I'm moving into is that generally people can tend to feel a little bit lost, unsure of themselves in the direction they want to go in. And we kind of shy away from that. So it's almost like the better the devil we know. And I quite often feel as well during life, or the way I look at it, is almost like incidents and things happen and nudge us into our lane, if you like, until we finally kind of find ourselves on that lane of purpose.
Yeah.
And then we look back in hindsight and go, holy shit, I get it now, but it took about 10 years of pain to sort of knock me over. That's what it was like for me anyway.
Yeah.
Was there any things along the way that kind of stand out for you that have kind of been putting you across onto your path?
Yeah, absolutely. And I often talk about social values and true values, and I also talk about social purpose and true purpose. And it may not sound as altruistic as what it's meant as maybe it sounds, but I think oftentimes we do the things that we want to do, or we think we need to do in order to get the things that we think we want. And I think oftentimes that 10-year painful journey is often a case of going to the buffet of life, or the buffet of business, or the buffet of relationships, and sampling lots of different things just to find out where our palate is. And it's really hard to know what tastes good unless you do try lots of different things. And, I know for myself personally, I thought I wanted to make a lot of money. And so I was initially attracted to the things that that would make me a lot of money. And, I honestly assumed once I made real money, I would be fulfilled and I would be happy. And I still remember my first year, I made $750,000 in my mid-20s.
Wow.
And I was still miserable, and I was like, wow, I don't get it. And so I thought maybe if I just buy the sports car that I've always wanted. So I went and bought one, and then, a couple months later I bought another one, and then I got a house on the water, and then I dated a model. And, I just kept on looking, I kept going back to the buffet. Well, try this. No, I'm not getting full on that. Go back to the buffet, try that. And it wasn't until, a real crux for me was, and I've lost everything a couple of times, but I essentially got ousted from a business that I was a partner in, because I was doing what I did really well. And that sometimes happens, sometimes we're really good at what we do and that becomes a threat to others. And I'm really grateful for the situation and the scenario and from the business partners that, that really kicked me out of business, because if they hadn't have, it wouldn't have given me the jolt and the wake up that I had that sent me on this pathway of, I basically traveled the world looking for myself. And it's, again, similar scenario. I went into Burleigh Head's flight center, and I said to the chick behind the counter, where are the most spiritual destinations on the planet? Because I was really trying to find myself, because I've been sampling from the buffet and nothing was, was really hitting the palate and giving me a sense of fulfillment from what I was trying. And I thought, well, maybe if I go on this spiritual journey that I hear about people taking, and I went to Machu Picchu, the cradle of life, and all these sacred spiritual sites in Africa and South America and Turkey. And yeah, and it was almost like I was waiting for some monk to fucking roll out from behind me. A temple and go, I've been waiting for you. I literally, I even tried to go to a monastery in China where, they don't take foreigners.
Wow.
And basically become a monk for 3 years, but they wouldn't take me because I didn't speak Mandarin. And I was just really looking. And I still remember coming back from this. It was supposed to be 6 months, ended up being like 7 or 8 months. And I was landing in Sydney at the time. And the moment the wheels of the jumbo jet hit the skids on the runway, I remember just something flashing into me and going, oh my God, you've just been looking in the wrong place. I've been looking outside, I've been looking in things, places, people. And what I realized in that moment is what I was actually looking for, which was, I guess, happiness. It was an inside job the whole way along. And it was from that point I started going inwards, and I started becoming a lot more intentional. I started becoming a lot more deliberate. I started really listening to my instincts a lot more rather than negating them. And at first I didn't make as much money as what I had in the past, because it was really almost like a test of purpose. But I just kept on, but everything, the things that I was doing, they felt good. It tasted good. It was giving me satiation. It was giving me more of the right kind of appetite. I wasn't having a taste of it and then coming back feeling still hungry. I was having a taste of it, and I'd finish the end of the day. And sometimes I wasn't making a lot of money, but I was sitting back and going, but man, I feel really good.
Yeah.
Happy. And then over time, and I think this is sometimes what's challenging for most people, is that sometimes even when you find what you want, whether that be in life or a relationship or commercially, we do still have to go through a period of trial, a period of tribulation to really bear the fruits of the harvest that we're sowing in that time.
Amazing. I'm just nodding my head in agreement here because I just sold my half of a company of 8 years that had done well. And it was the biggest decision I ever had to make, but I felt I wasn't on purpose. And I've taken that step backwards, Kerwin. And it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
It
Like,
really is.
it's incredible, mate. Why do you think we wait? Like, why do you think we're always looking externally for answers? Because I believe you've been in a fortunate position to actually achieve the success and then go, huh, actually, maybe this was where a lot of people, I think a lot of us can be trying to get there, but never actually reach it. So we're constantly in that hamster wheel. I mean, yeah, why do you think we do that and fall into that trap?
I think Jim Carrey says it best. I think he says, I wish everyone could achieve all of their financial and fame goals that they've ever wanted so that they could realize that that's not it. And I think, we're herd, but we're herd animals, we're mammals. And we often look to our environment to tell us what to do. And we look to the herd to tell us what to do. And, culturally, we are very much conditioned to look to the TV, to look to the silver screen, to look to celebrity for what is supposed to be right, what is supposed to be normal, what is supposed to be good, what's supposed to be pretty, what's supposed to be healthy. And as a result, we often get wound up in the celebrity of what we see. And I don't necessarily mean the celebrity of celebrities as a people, but the celebrity of the authority that is given to the things that have attention, the Insta mindset, the Instagram mindset, the microwave mindset, where people think that things should come easy, they should come fast. And when we're in a world that is so outwardly directed, we grow up in a world that is so outwardly directed, depending on the community that you're in, it often just becomes, well, isn't that just what we do? And it's not until, something, someone, or some experience comes into our life and often wakes us up, which is usually in the form of pain. And, and I call it feathers, bricks, and trucks. Sometimes a little feather will give you a little bit of a tickle on the face, and you'll sit there and you'll be like, oh, what's that? Oh my God. Oh, okay, I've got this sensation. I've got this something that's there. Oh, I'll just ignore it. And then, all of a sudden, then something comes in and go donk, and you're like, oh, what's that all about? Oh, I'll just ignore it. And then before you know it, a fucking Mack truck comes and it mows you down. And, that's often how purpose can work. And I think the more, because there's in tune with purpose and then there's on purpose. And I think when you start becoming in tune with purpose, you start getting the feathers, the bricks, and the trucks. And that being in tune and those signals are really designed to get you on purpose. And the more in tune and off purpose you are, the more of these messages you're going to start getting.
Yeah.
And then the more in tune and on purpose you're going to get, the more flow we experience, the more effortless it becomes. But there will be a test. It's oftentimes the universe, as we sometimes refer to, will give us a little bit of okay, you're on the right path. Let me give you some breadcrumbs to let you know you're on the right path. Okay, great. You're on it. You got some momentum. Okay, now I'm just going to turn the resistance wheel up a little bit so that you can now build some muscles that you need to in order to fulfill, your potential with your purpose. Because purpose, like anything, requires fulfillment. And with anything, any form of potential to be realized or fulfilled, there is an element of strength that's required. And whether it be in a relationship or within ourselves or within an entrepreneurial pursuit, strength must be built. Whether it in meditation, strength and discipline must be built. In a relationship, strength and discipline must be built. And the only way that we develop strength and discipline, which ultimately gives us resilience and grit, is through the increasing of resistance. And sometimes I think the challenge is we think, again, you see these spiritually egotistical people who are just constantly looking for flow state. And like, for me, I just don't think that that's the whole truth. I think it's partially the truth. But if you've got these people that are constantly looking for flow, the moment they get resistance, they run in the opposite direction. They sometimes miss the opportunities that resistance will give them in the form of building strength and resilience and building ultimately grit.
Yeah. It takes, I mean, for me, like it takes a massive amount of courage to kind of listen to that, because then we're stepping into the unknown, I think. Right. And the unknown is where all the transformation change plays, but it's the scariest place because it's an unknown and we're only using our past experiences to try and create a future outcome. But
it's interesting. That's where the potential lives. Like, because, we've got Newtonian, we've got the Newtonian world and we've got the quantum world. The Newtonian world is very cause and effect, and the quantum world is full of potential. And when we're living in the known, we live in this framework of how things should be done. It's very Newtonian. If I do this, that will happen. But when we live in the unknown, there's nothing but this unpredictability and this sea of probability that can be affected just by the way that we move and the way we act, and ultimately, which is driven by the way that we think. And when we live in that, it is so much easier, so much faster, so much quicker, still resistance to get where we want to go, because there's not just one road to get there. There's now, 50 million roads to get there, and, the procrastinators would be going, oh my God, it's hard enough to decide with one road. Well, when you've got 50 million roads and you're not guided by your intellect, you're guided by this GPS that lives in your heart, you can have 50 million roads in front of you, and you can hop, skip, and jump between the different roads as you're going, depending on the terrain, to get where you want to go 1,000 times faster than find this one road that just perhaps, goes to the East Coast and the West Coast and the South Coast before getting you to the North Coast.
Totally. How do you deal with the unknown? Like, stepping into it, are you just so used to it now, or is there still a process?
I think exposure therapy is something that I'm very familiar, because I do a lot in the area of high performance. And high performance is fundamentally driven by stress conditioning, whether it be at elite professional sport level, whether it be at the elite level as a business owner, or even just at the elite level of relationships, or even self-discipline. It's learning how to condition ourselves against higher levels and higher levels of stress. And I think the more we expose ourselves to the things that create discomfort, the more opportunity we get to condition ourselves to find a baseline within that discomfort, to find that comfort within discomfort. And that really is the key, whether it be a professional sports person, or a high performance entrepreneur, or, even someone who's wanting to become, have a level of enlightenment through meditation. There's always discomfort, but it's allowing ourselves to experience that discomfort with a knowing that it's the right thing to do, that it is good for us, that it's serving us, and it's giving us exactly what we need. And if the more frequently we expose ourselves to any stimulus that is uncomfortable, the easier it is for our all of our different nervous systems, and also our psychology, to be able to adapt, and then bring in a level of, because most people, when they experience levels of discomfort, depending on the degree, it will activate, in some cases, the autonomic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And so they never actually get to fully appreciate the levels of consciousness that can come when you're in a high stress or a high discomfort environment. And when you can maintain and regulate and reset your autonomic nervous system just through exposure therapy and other forms of psychological and biological disciplines, you start to introduce yourself to a level of awareness around discomfort that very few people get introduced to. And it gives you a whole new perspective on life, because all of a sudden this thing that was really bad, that was really uncomfortable, because that's all you saw, you start to let go of the discomfort, and you still feel a level of discomfort. You get to see all this other texture, all this other tapestry, and it's just a completely different experience.
Yeah, I love it, Kerwin. It's almost like seeing things for what they are, not through the lens of being stressed out your eyeballs first.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I was reading in your bio yesterday, and if I'm not mistaken, it says that you died nearly 6 times. Is that correct?
I think it's 7 now. Yeah.
7. Well, that's not something you hear every day for a start. I was quite surprised when I saw that. What kind of impact has that had on your life?
Huge. Look, I think death is relative, and it's also one of those things that it's a constant. It's something we all experience. I just have experienced an unusual amount of death, both within, friends and family, but also within my own mortality. And every single time, it just provides an extra level of wake up, an extra level of, I don't know if you've read the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, but fundamentally, it talks about, in order for us to truly live, we first must become comfortable with death. We first must accept death as an outcome that we can't avoid. We can't outrun it. We can't protect ourselves from it. And when I had my first few near-death experiences, I got into skydiving. Actually, a couple of my near-death experiences came from skydiving. I did 200 skydives in a 12-month period, and I actually used skydiving as a form of exposure therapy to conquer the fear of death, because I'd had these near-death experiences. And as a result, I started to develop this fear of dying. And I also had this fear of heights. And so for me, I use skydiving as a therapy to overcome a fear of heights and a fear of death as well. Because every time, if you're a conscious skydiver, every time you go up in a load, you realize that there is a possibility that your parachute will not open, and you can end up as a fatality. And so when you do that 200 times in a very, very short period of time, you start to develop a very different relationship with death. And for me, you know, I've started to realize that death is very much it's very much a transformation. It's the highest level of transformation. And based on the law of thermodynamics, energy is not created nor is it destroyed. It just changes form. And, you know, what we understand about death, you know, depending on what you believe philosophically or even religiously, you know, there is an energy in our body. And when the biology of our body ceases to function, that energy doesn't just disappear. It changes form and it goes somewhere else. And, you know, it is the ultimate form of transformation. And so for me, you know, I really built this incredible relationship with death, like I have with many things, like failure. I think most people look at death the wrong way, but they also look at failure. They think failure is something is bad, and so they do everything they can to avoid it, not realizing that failure is the very key to closing the gap of what it is that we're trying to do. Because if you do something and you fail, all it does is expose a gap in a skill, a knowledge, or an experience. And that is by virtue there to tell you what skills, knowledge, and experience you need to close the gap so that you can move forward. Yeah. And depending on your relationship with failure, you'll either be like, oh, first of all, I'll try and avoid failure, but if I do fail, I'll just pretend it didn't happen. So I'll actually learn no lessons from it. So for me, my relationship with death is very similar. Like, it's very much about, you know, what does it mean? What is the benefits of death? And for me, it is very transformative. But it's interesting is when my son was born, it completely changed like it almost hit the reset button. And all of a sudden I started fearing my mortality again. And so I'm back to I won't say I'm back to square one, but there's always another layer, you know, and whether it be dealing with death or dealing with failure, or even stress conditioning, you know, it's building muscle. And if you stop exercising that muscle, or if you get lazy, that muscle gets weak. And then you realize, you know, when you go to pick up something, oh shit, I'm not as strong as I thought I was. And that's the same with dealing with death. It's the same with dealing with failure. It's the same with anything in life, you know.
There's always a beginner's mind needed, isn't there?
That is the master. That is the mastery is the beginner mind. Mastery is the student mind, and always knowing that there is something more to learn.
Yeah, totally, mate. That's incredible. A couple of things, like a couple of open loops there as well, because you talk a little bit about fear, and then you went skydiving and to overcome fears. And what relationship do you have with fear now then? Do you just lean into it?
I have a great relationship with fear. And again, much like failure, I have an amazing relationship with failure. I have a great relationship with death. I have an amazing relationship with fear. Like, fear is one of those things that I really have programmed myself to respond very, very differently to. And that's, you know, again, through the performance training that I put myself through, you know, you were only born with two basic fears. You're born with the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Both of those things activate your autonomic nervous system. And that autonomic nervous system, in most cases, will override every other function that you have in order to fight your way out of a situation or to flee that situation. And so for me, you know, I did skydiving to overcome the fear of falling. You know, I've trained with special forces in Europe and Navy SEALs, you know, when it comes to special weapons and tactics, doing, you know, really high intensity weapons training to overcome, you know, the response from loud noises. And for me, when you can overcome loud noises, you know, and especially when you're working with weapons that have loud noises and percussion and concussion that comes from that, and you're dealing with the baseline fears of falling by throwing yourself out of a plane, every other fear is rooted from that. And so, you know, once you start to deal with those base level fears, and once you can conquer the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, and you can literally reset your nervous system in situations where it's quite extreme. And it's not, you know, I've not just put myself in situations where I'm falling, and I put myself in situations where I'm falling and I'm having to do, you know,
That's all right.
You know, formation work. So not only am I falling through the sky, but I'm having to do complex formation work whilst falling through the sky. You know, when I'm dealing with loud noise, I don't just go to the range and fire a gun. I'm learning how to essentially work between a range of different weapons, transitioning between different weapons in different situations, with simulated jams, with, you know, 1 man, 2 man, 3 man, 4 man teams in situations where we're doing kill houses, carjackings, airplane jacking. So there's high intent. So it's not just loud noises, but then how do you deal with the trigger and then complex thinking processes? And the more you can do that, the easier it is for you to override the autonomic system when it's activated and be able to think clearly when those situations arise. You know, for me, I do my best work when everyone else is fucking shitting themselves. Like, I do my best work when everyone else is crumbling, because I literally have just trained my mind to be able to perform at such extreme levels that, you know, it really just becomes second nature.
Well, I was going to say, them scenarios transferring into just everyday life, you'd have a very different relationship with stress and scenarios.
Like, to me, like, it takes a lot to stress me.
I can imagine.
It takes a lot to stress me now. you know. And I think the ultimate test for me really was, you know, it's kind of funny. I don't talk about this often, but I was in Europe last year. I was training with the special forces over there, and we'd been training for like 8 days straight. And we went out to this restaurant, and there was like 12 of us, and you know, most of us, everyone looked like a mercenary basically, muscle, tats, you know, very military look. And I'm hanging out with these guys. We're in this restaurant. And our group got mistaken for a group of terrorists, and the restaurant got raided by the counter-terrorism unit. And these guys are fully clad in camouflage, balaclavas, AK-47s. These guys came in, weapons loaded, you know, safety guns hot. They came into our room hot, and they were like literally, I'm talking, I was knife-handed in the throat, thrown against the wall, an AK-47 put in my face, and these guys are screaming in Russian. And you know, there was 12 guys that surrounded us and they're screaming and forcing us on the floor. And it was, as I said, it was about 8 or 9 days into my training. And I remember that to me, it was almost like the exam. And it turns out it was a, you know, mistaken identity. It was hilarious. But I remember like this guy throws me up against the wall and he puts the gun in my face. And we'd just done an AK-47 orientation that day. And I remember looking at the gun going, oh, wow, his gun is in really good condition. And then I remember looking around and looking at his safety going, oh, wow, his safety's off. And then I looked at his finger and I was like, wow, his finger's on the trigger. And then I looked at his eyes and I was like, wow, this guy means, because for a second there, and I'll give you a little bit of backstory, it was one of the guy's birthdays, and for a second there, and he had been involved in training some of the counter-terrorism guys in Ukraine. And so for a second there, I thought this was like, they were taking the piss for his birthday. I thought they're doing this, oh, we're going to razz him up for his birthday. We'll raid his birthday party and say, you know, surprise. And it was at this point, I was like, holy shit, this boy means business. And it was at that point when I clicked, wow, these boys mean business. I remember thinking to myself, I'm so calm. And I just remember looking around the room, and you know, everyone was responding everyone was having their own experience. But I was just like, I don't even think my heart rate went up 10 beats a minute. I was just like, wow. And then these guys, literally, guy walked in with a film camera, looked around, was like, screamed something in Russian, which basically the equivalent to, we got the wrong guys. They went screaming out of the room. As soon as they were screaming out of the room, like we all sat down, and these guys, most of them are mercenaries, and we just started eating our dinner again. The whole restaurant, this is like a high-end restaurant in Ukraine, in Kiev. Everybody cleared out, like women, children screaming, running for their lives, and we just sit down and start eating again. And for me, you know, I look at that as a funny scenario, and I don't say that that's something that everybody should do, but for me, that was almost, I found a new baseline. Like, and I thought, wow, if that can't stress me, I wonder what can, you know?
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible, mate. That's incredible. Wow. I didn't expect you to say that. That was for sure.
No, I don't share that very often.
Mate, there was one other subject I wanted to touch on quickly before we change gears.
Yeah.
And that was money. And why is it, do you think, that a lot of people struggle with the concept of money, and we always seem to be in this we never have enough mentality?
Look, I think it's rooted in our environment. I think money is a social disorder. No, let me rephrase that. I think most people's view on money is a social disorder, especially if they don't have enough of what they want or what they need. And it's rooted in this almost hierarchical power imbalance that is rooted into people, whereby a lot of people are taught that money is bad. You know, there's even scripture that talks about money is the root of all evil. You know, money doesn't grow on trees. I think when you look at the divorce rates, you know, I think it's where we are here, the divorce rates are almost like I think it's like 2 in 3 marriages end in divorce. Wow. And I think it's something like 78% of divorces are a result of arguments over finance and money. And you know, when you're a child that is growing up in a world as today, and as I have, like I'm in my 40s, you know, I remember growing up and all the cartoons on TV, you know, the rich people were portrayed as evil, you know, and you know, they weren't nice people. And you know, then you start, you know, seeing the way that, you know, kids at school were treated. If their parents had money, they were always singled out and, you know, given a hard time. And then when you come home and you hear your parents fighting about money and talking about money in very disrespectful ways, and when you're always being told, no, we can't afford that, and you start resenting the situations you're in because you can't afford things, and you start thinking that money is this, you know, this thing that is, you know, not necessarily done for good. And you know, the media portrays money in a very negative context. You know, the school system, most parents, you know, argue over it and talk about it in negative ways. And, you know, is it any wonder that we grow up with this dysfunction and this disorder around money? And when you see so much conflict that has arisen as a result of money, you know, most people, depending on where they come from, will have a higher value on money than they'll have on, a higher value on family than they will on money, because they've, you know, obviously we're mammals, and so connection is important to us. But when most people, if not all people, and I've surveyed this all over the world, and it's unanimous in every room that I've ever surveyed, it's about 80-90% of the rooms that I've surveyed will always say they've experienced conflict in the home when they were kids as a result of money on a regular basis. And so when you're a child and you grow up and you go, oh, money creates conflict, and you're a mammal, which is a social animal, which is driven by connection, you will literally avoid the things that create social conflict. And money is one of those things that, unconsciously for many people becomes this source of social conflict. It becomes this source of, family conflict. And, we kind of are brought up, and then we reach the age of 15 where, we by this point, it's very unconscious. Money is bad. We're not thinking money is bad. We just, people talk about money and we become quite disrespectful or judgmental. But then we reach the age of 15, we're like, well, shit, if I want to hang out with my friends, I need money. And so then we kind of enter what's called the tangled hierarchy phase where, we want to have money, but we don't want to have too much. So we need money if we want to hang out with our friends. And so what ends up happening, and you see this the world over, is people enter what I call this, the survival state where they'll always make just enough money in order to survive. And if they make more, they'll always come up with the most creative and ingenious ways to get rid of it really quickly. They'll either do something silly and get themselves fined or lose it, or invest in something silly that is too good to be true and lose it, or they'll buy a car and it'll spend too much money on, and as a result it's like you're going to be depreciating the asset, or they'll buy a beautiful house at the top of the market, and they just people do the most, and I'm sure you've seen it, but I've seen people use the most creative ways to get rid of excess money. It's incredible. Whereas when you look at a real value on money, value, when you look at what a value is a motive. It's a motive system. But it's a reason to do something and a reason not to do something. But a value is something we care about. It's of value to us. And you can really tell where people's relationship is at with a value based on how they care for that value. Yeah. And people might say, well, I have a value on money, but they treat money like shit. And, they don't look after it. They don't nurture it. They don't care for it. They don't put it in an environment where it can grow. Because when you think about your children and what do we do with children? We care for them. We nurture them. We put them in situations to grow so that they can have more skills and more talents. And money is a form of energy. It's a form of consciousness as well. And it responds to growth the same way a baby does. It develops. Money, by virtue of what it is, or by virtue of any form of energy, it loves to expand. Energy loves expansion. It hates, energy will avoid atrophy. And I think when you look at money as an energy, it is looking for expansion, it's looking for its purpose. The purpose of money is to appreciate. And most people don't appreciate money, and so therefore they put this energy of depreciation on it. And when when money depreciates, it loses its value. And when things lose value, they literally tend to go away.
Yeah.
And the most part is driven by lack. And lack, is that situation whereby there's never enough. We always want more. And it really does end up becoming this social disorder where people want money and then they do silly things, and it becomes this self-sabotage scenario that just loops around and around and around.
Yeah, I've certainly caught myself doing that in the past, that's for sure. That's triggered so many questions, but I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to keep pushing through, Kerwin. Well, one last question on money. What tip would you give someone right now that might have a poor relationship with money that they could start doing today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's going to sound cliche, but just be grateful for what you've got. Because when we look at what gratitude is a form of appreciation. And when we are grateful for things, when we show appreciation for things, those things expand. And that's ultimately what we want. And, that's the key, not just for money. That's the key for anything that you want. Like anything you want to, if you want a relationship to expand, bathe it in appreciation. It's amazing how people light up when you bathe appreciation on them, when you shower them with appreciation and gratitude. It's amazing how your clients will open up and spend more money with you when you shower them with appreciation. And if you do want more money, my advice is just appreciate what you've got, and be careful with what you do with it, because money is like friends. Because if you've got money and you think, well, I'm always good with money, but I'll give it to people who are bad with it, that's not my fault. Because oftentimes people will get money and they'll give it to others. And if they give it to people who depreciate it or who treat money poorly, that is a reflection on you. If you and I, Guy, are friends, and then, I send someone over to you, go, catch up with this guy. I want to introduce you to this guy. His name's John. And then you catch up with John, and John's a real dick. And, you taking him around your city and you end up having to spend this whole day with this douchebag. You'll be like, far out. Why did he fucking set me up with this guy? Does he really not like me? And as a result, it will affect our relationship, you know. And the same is true with money. Like, we've got to be careful with the chain that, you know, once it comes into our stead, once it comes to do our care, we've got to be careful with where we express money and who we express it to.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agreement. It's funny you say gratitude, because that's my mantra. Gratitude is the ultimate form of receivership. And I remind myself that every day when I start my day, you know. Right, I'm going to change gears, and I got some questions that I ask everyone on the show. And the first gear is, what's one of your low points in your life you've had, but later in life has turned into be a great blessing?
Look, I've got so many. The one that's most recent would probably be the separation with my wife. That's still quite fresh. Like, my wife and I separated about 12 months ago. And at the time, it shattered an idea. Like, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I was brought up in a single mum household on a pension. And so when I grew up with this ideal that, you know, at some point in the future, I'm going to have a child, and I'm going to give the child everything that I never had, which was, you know, a whole family and a father that is present constantly. And so for me, that was really a driving force. I didn't get married until almost 40, you know, later in life. So, you know, I was really waiting for the right time. And so when I met my wife, you know, we had our fair share of issues. And by the time it got to the point where the trigger was pulled and my wife pulled the trigger, we were both at the same point. We knew the relationship wasn't working. But I, you know, as you know, look, with my background, I'm in performance, and I'm the kind of guy that I can deal with enormous levels of discomfort. If I've got a goal, you know, I can go through anything. I can fight until I've got no teeth left. And, you know, I just hadn't given up the fight. And my wife had got to the point where she's like, look, we've tried so much. You know, I think the right next move is really for us to separate. And it was quite devastating, not because I agreed with her. Like, we'd done so much. We'd tried counseling. We'd been both very conscious people. It wasn't that we hadn't given it a really good, you know, run for its money. But my ideal was absolutely shattered. And, you know, at the time I was like, you know, oh my God, what have I done to my son? You know, am I going to screw him up as well? You know, because I felt I had my fair share of wounds from my own childhood as a result of, you know, how I grew up with no real present father. And then, you know, over time, and it happened really quickly. And again, it happened probably as fast as it did based on the level of awareness that I brought to the situation. Because again, I'm always geared for, okay, this is bad. If something's bad happening, what's good about it? You know, what is the benefit of this? How is this serving? What is this? So from the moment that this started to eventuate, it wasn't a hindsight that came in 2 years later. In some cases, it started happening within days and weeks, but it did take time because it was an incredibly painful period for me. But, you know, the benefits that came through was I started having this relationship with my son that was just like nothing else. Like, literally, my relationship with my son now is 1,000 times better than it was when I was together with my wife. And I already had a great relationship with him when we were together, but it's like 1,000 times better. We're 1,000 times closer. I'm 1,000 times better the dad that I was when we were together. And there's this, you know, I'm now, you know, I've dropped fucking 15 kilos. You know, I'm healthier than I've ever been. I'm faster than I've ever been. I'm by myself, and I'm actually doing a lot of the work that needs to be done, you know, in order for me to be whole and healthy for whatever next relationship, you know, I'm going to put myself into. And so I'm a better person. I'm a better father. I'm more healthy. I'm a better entrepreneur. My business has grown. Like, there's been so many incredible, I've become a better leader, you know, a better communicator. It's just, the list goes on and on and on. And so I'm so grateful to Kristen, you know, my ex-wife. She's an incredible person, you know, and there was a few periods within that because, you know, there was some stuff that happened. It was that was a bit challenging for me to deal with. But now I can look back on it all and just, you know, see the perfection that is there, and, you know, bask in the gratitude and the appreciation for what it is, which is just perfect.
Amazing. How old is your son, Kerwin?
He's 4.25.
4.25. Amazing.
He's very passionate about his quarter.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. What does your morning routine look like?
Pretty intense. Well, actually, I guess it is what it is. I normally wake up somewhere between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. I don't use an alarm. I just wake up. It normally starts with me getting up, going in, washing my face, and then I'll normally meditate for anywhere between half an hour to an hour, sometimes an hour and a half if I wake up a little bit earlier. I do Vedic meditation, which is, you know, along the same veins as transcendental meditation. Then I will come out of my meditation. I'll normally do about, you know, 30 minutes of community management all across my social media channels. I'm very active on my social media. Then I'll get myself up, go into the shower. I normally have a shower for about. It's going to sound a little bit this is what it is. I normally shower for about 10, 15 minutes, but when I shower, I'm stretching in the shower. I'm doing a mobility routine. I do a mobility routine for my hips, mobility routine for my legs, my ankles, my knees. I do autonomic breathing practices in the shower. So I'm doing hyperventilation, essentially, and holding my breath. And then I come out and, like everyone else, I've basically got drying myself off and getting dressed down to an art. I can normally do that in about 6 minutes. Along with my normal routine. I don't actually eat breakfast. I follow an intermittent fasting schedule, so I fast for 18 hours every day. I normally have my first meal about 2 o'clock. And so as a result, that gives me about a half hour, 45 minutes extra day. Normally by this point, my son has come in, normally in the middle of a meditation. And so he will normally hang around my neck or lay in my lap or lay all over me or run around me whilst I'm doing a meditation. Sometimes he'll sit down with me and do the meditation. And oftentimes he will jump in the shower once I finish my meditation. Oh, actually, I should point this out, because once I finish my meditation, we normally spend at least 10, 15, 20 minutes in bed playing a game called Chasing Feet or Belly to Belly and just chatting. He'll tell me about his dreams. I always ask about his dreams every day. And then we have the shower. He'll come in the shower with me, and then we'll go out. I don't eat breakfast, but I make breakfast for him. I make him a very healthy pancake, which consists of eggs and banana and blueberries and dates, and then I'll sit down and have breakfast he'll have breakfast and we'll talk, set up his day, talk about what he's going to do at school, and then I will drop him at school and off to work that I come. So that's pretty much my morning routine.
That's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. Mate, if you could have dinner with anyone tonight from anywhere in the world at any time frame, who would it be and why?
Yeah, great question. I think this is going to sound a little bit cliche, but someone who I've always really admired is Einstein, and the reason being is just his ability to think creatively. Like, he was a very creative thinker. Like, for someone who essentially didn't learn how to read or write until a late age, who didn't even learn. I think he didn't even learn how to speak until he was like 4 or 5. He's really got an incredible story. The fact that he came up with his theories the way that he did through daydreaming. I'm a big daydreamer. I daydream a lot, and I just think he's a very incredibly interesting man. And if there was one other person I'd throw in there, it would be Eckhart Tolle. I honestly believe that he is the modern incarnation of the Buddha. He's a very wise man, very spiritual man, very. Yeah, he's zen as fuck.
Yeah, he's a dude. I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners about everything we covered today for them to ponder on?
Well, your community is very much in the wellness space, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Look, I think, if there's something else I would share, is just the importance of holistic wellness, and wellness is more than just eating organics. I've met plenty of people who eat really well, who mentally just, have their own set of, and look, we all have our own set of challenges, mentally, physically, health, spiritually. But I think if there's one thing that I'd leave people with, is the importance of just developing higher and higher levels of consciousness around different areas of their life. Because I honestly believe that the greatest hope we have as a species in order to survive the next century or so is just to increase our level of consciousness. And I don't necessarily, although it has spiritual connotations, I don't necessarily mean that in a spiritual context, but I just mean that in a general context. Because the more aware we become of the impacts that our thoughts and our actions have on ourselves, the more aware of the impacts our thoughts and our behaviors have on others, and the more aware we become of our thoughts and our behaviors and the way that they impact the planet, the more conscious we become of self, the more conscious we become of others, the more conscious we become of our environment, the more we are likely to change our behaviors about the way that we treat ourselves, the way that we treat others, and ultimately the way that we treat our planet. Because the thing is, our planet's going to be fine, no matter what, our planet's going to be fine. But as a species, whether or not we will survive the next couple of centuries really will come down to how we take care of the planet. And take care of ourselves and take care of everyone else around us. I think community is something that's just becoming, I think we've come from tribes to these big cities, and I think it's almost like we're creating this 360, like we're going back to the importance of community, and I think that's coming as a result of consciousness. We're seeing, social media is birthing all these communities in not just wellness, but in spirituality and everything from dog fucking grooming, community is really where it's at. The more conscious we become as humans, the more conscious our communities become, the greater the leaders we have in our communities as a result of the heightened levels of consciousness and lower levels of ego. I think the greater hope we have as a species to really go on to the next level.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I've been slowly building my community with Let It In, and seeing strangers come together, actually being vulnerable and open, and actually starting to share things and support each other and come from a place of care. Like, I think it's in everyone. We just need to give them an environment to do it.
Absolutely.
And help them out. Yeah, absolutely. Mate, for anyone listening to this that wants to learn more about Kerwin Rae, where can I send them to? Where's the best place to check them out?
We're all over the web. KerwinRae.com. So that's KERWIN.com. Also huge on Facebook. We've got Instagram. We've got Snapchat, LinkedIn. But yeah, if you check out our website and Facebook, even YouTube, we've got videos all over the place. So we've got, like I'm talking, we've got probably a couple thousand videos of resources that people can access for free about many of the concepts that we've talked about today, plus a absolute ton more that can really help people just live a better life.
Totally. And I just want to add to that, because your videos that were freely available, I took so much courage from that when I was going through my transition to my next stage in life, and I was watching them, and it was amazing. So I second that. Like, I encourage everyone to check it out.
Thanks, guys.
For sure. You're welcome, Kerwin. Mate, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, brother.